Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone. And by the way, Frank, I don't know if I let you know, I did eventually go and get an X-ray because like I was still sore, but it's just that I'm old. Nothing got broken from that fall. I'm just old.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly happy to hear that. I'm just disappointed that you left New Mexico in worse physical condition than when you came.
I've been a klutz my whole life though. Me falling is not unusual. Wayne will tell you, I was just walking one day and like fell face first into the pavement in Denver. Like I and went right to a job interview, bleeding from my head, basically. Because I was walking in the door I'm like, no, we're here. I'm going to that interview.
Well, that would make an impression.
But me falling isn't that unusual. But because it was starting to hurt worse, it actually feels better now. I was a bit concerned, but no, nothing. Which I'm glad. Yeah, but I was starting to get a little worried that maybe there was a fracture. I wasn't.
Chuck Bolton.
Well, I'm glad you're on the road to recovery. Thanks for letting me know.
Stephen Ecker. Nick Zelski.
Yeah, I fell and broke a rib in California, but I was drunk that time, so I had an excuse. For some reason, Roger Wirtz tried to sign on to this meeting yesterday. I think I need to give him a call. So I think he's confused somewhere. Well, we're going to give it 3 minutes because of Libertarian Standard Time. With alternates, we do have a quorum. But I'd like to give it a few minutes.
And we also have a really good NCAA playoff game right now that's in overtime. So
Is that what's going on?
Maybe some of us are distracted a little bit.
Is that the prior engagement that Richard Brown had that said why he said he couldn't come? Oh, Mike Seebeck is who we don't have. Now that's unusual. That is not typical. I need to. There's Richard Brown. Is the game over? If it is, then I know his excuse.
No, there's about 1:40 left. Michigan State's up by 2 over third-ranked Kansas State. But it's about to be tied. No, yes. Doing the play-by-play here.
Mike Seebeck's on his way. He had the time confused. I knew if he wasn't here, there was something. Wayne, when you, what a look you gave me. Are you bringing pizza? Will you bring me a little thing of the coconut rum? Okay, let's see. We are going to get started though in just 1 minute. Who else is normally always here? that we're missing. I knew Mike Seebeck not being here was definitely unusual.
I don't see Paul Bracco.
That's another one. Oh, I think he said he was going to miss it. Didn't he email? I thought I saw an email from him. I'm gonna call him though, why not?
Just Tewksbury. Patrick Mitchell, I have him. Oh, Mike Seebeck.
Oh, sorry about that. I had my time zones mixed up.
Mike's tie-dyes in the house.
I'm actually not wearing tie-dye at the moment for a change. I know.
Oh,
Call the
darn.
press. It's breaking news.
no.
You're fired.
Okay, then I'll see you later. I'll show my-
Yeah.
Karen Ann, you muted yourself.
Mike tie-dyes.
Yeah, Paul Bracco couldn't make it.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we're gonna get called to order at 8:51 Eastern. Let me though pull up, 1 second, I got this bouncy on my Mac bar here. And pull up the agenda. And in the meantime, if you could take attendance.
Yes, Arrowwood, I'm here. Paul Bracco is not. Nicholas Sazelski,
Here,
all right. Karen Ann Harlos,
Present.
Rob Latham,
Here.
Frank Martin,
Here.
Ken Molman,
Here.
Tom Rowlett, Mike Rufo. Okay, Tom Rowlett, Mike Rufo, Madam Chair, Paul Bracco, Tom Rowlett, and Mike Rufo are absent.
Okay, but we do have some alternates, so
Yes, Mr. Moulton,
Dr. Moulton is here. Yes.
Rich Tomaso, David Roberson, Greg Deal, Roger Roots, Dana Logan, Dean Rogers,
I'm here.
all right, Rich Tomaso, David Roberson, Greg Deal, Roger Roots, Dana Logan. Madam Chair, we have two alternates present, Chuck Moulton, number 1, and Dean Rogers, number 7.
okay, and I know Mike Rufo was planning on being here. Thank you. Oh, well, I don't have his number handy, so we are going to get started. I might look it up in a break, but there is now time for public comments. If anyone has any comments, please use the reaction button and raise your hand. This would also, as I typically say, include any committee members that may have something they wish to address to the committee that doesn't necessarily fall within the agenda. So I'll give you a few moments to do that if you wish. Okay, seeing none, we are moving on to the approval of the minutes from the previous 2 meetings. So in the agenda, there are links first to the draft from February 23rd, with the understanding that this was more detailed than further ones, but we agreed we were going to leave that alone as long as it was accurate. And there's also a link to the draft, and this is the updated ones from after the corrections. I believe it was that Mr. Bracco put on the list for March 9th. So are there any further corrections to either the draft minutes from February 23rd or from March 9th?
I'll just make a record that I don't know if I need to be recognized. The 223 ones, I mean, there's just typos, but I don't think they're substantive. So that's not going to cause me not to vote in favor of approving the minutes.
Okay. So if there's no objections, and those two sets of minutes will be approved. Was someone trying to be recognized? No? Okay, I kind of sprung this on you, but the rationale subcommittee, I didn't know if there was any, if you guys were still waiting till there were more, or if there was anything that you wish to add. I have been moving the approved language, a copy of it, into your little subfolder in case you wanted to work on it. So Mr. Latham, I forget everyone who's on that committee, to be honest with you. I know it's you, so that's why I'm picking on you. Do you know if there's anything to add?
No, I think from my own perspective, I'm just kind of waiting to get a critical mass. And then I think it's Mr. Bracco and maybe Mr. Moulton has joined us in that, I think. But
Yes.
so yeah, I think from my perspective, I'm just waiting until there's a critical mass of stuff before I start drafting those.
Okay, I figured I'd just stick that on there just to keep that in the front of our minds. And here's another new item. So I was taking a look, and thank you, Mr. Latham, for bringing this to my attention last time where I needed to update the chair's draft timeline. But where we are coming up on the draft timeline is I wanted to have a first quarter town hall. And what I mean by that, it's what Roberts would typically call a public hearing, where I would send out a party-wide email. I'd have Lainey obviously do that, to invite party members to a meeting just to talk with us about the proposals that have already been passed, to get feedback in case people wanted to move to amend something previously adopted later, and to start to build trust and consensus. Now, we don't have to do one this early if the committee doesn't want to. It was on my draft timeline, so I wanted to open this up for brief discussion on 2 points. First, do we want to do one this early? I'd like to do one. I'd like to do 4 this year. I'd like to do one every, or is it every quarter? Is that 4 or 3? There's a reason I'm not the treasurer. Let's just put it this way. I'd like to do one every quarter this year. And if so, would we like to skip a Thursday meeting to do that? So first, do we want it? And second, if so, when? So I'd like to open the floor to discussion on that. Mr. Sazowski?
I think it could be a decent idea. It is early and we only have a couple things that, I mean, I guess we have more than a couple things we've got through already, but at the very least, it would give, I guess, a bigger platform for members to approach with potential ideas or things they'd like to see changed in the bylaws that we haven't gotten to and don't have on the agenda yet. So.
And if I could ask you a question, if you are open then to the idea of it, would you think it would be just, substituting one of our normal meetings? Like, for instance, I'm just going to pick a day out of the air. Like, I don't know, like April. So our next meeting after this one is the 6th, like April 20th, 4/20. That would be a great day for a town hall and sponsored out of Colorado. Something like that, or would you think a weekend afternoon?
That's a good question. It's probably more convenient on a Thursday night. A weekend afternoon or evening might pull in more attendance, so I'm not quite sure if I have an opinion on that yet.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I think having it during, in place of one of our meetings is a good idea. For one thing, if there's minimal participation, we can just go ahead and do our meeting thing. Or if like it only takes half an hour to deal with the public, then, we can just go ahead and work on other things. Know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Latham, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna add about just replacing one of the normal Thursday evening meetings. It does feel a little early to be doing that, and I can't recall a time prior to a national convention where it's just kind of done immediately before. I do like the idea of creating opportunity for more member engagement in what the committees are doing. There is, I think, just the issue of self-selection, that we ought to be mindful of. And then I also come to the part where it just might be a little early. I would be even thinking of, something that's even second quarter-ish, so into the fall, before doing something like that.
Thank you. And just food for thought, because I believe, excuse me, this was something Mr. Soselski brought up. It wouldn't only be for the things we've already, and this is an argument for an early one, that we've already considered, but perhaps, someone out there has some idea or some flaw they've seen that we haven't even thought of, that might take some work and some thought. So an early one. And what's the worst that happens? Nobody comes. Just reminding the committee that is one. Again, all of these are ultimately the committee's decisions, but one of the things I did run on when I was seeking the chairmanship of this committee was to have multiple town halls to try to get member engagement, get member buy-in, make them members feel and actually be heard. And as it gets closer to convention, I've already started to discuss this with the executive director, was to have like a mini, I don't want to call it a mock convention because it's not the whole convention, but like a mini, like we're presenting this to presumptive delegates and hearing debate and having mock votes to see how things might actually go. That will give us some direction on how things might end up going on the floor, because I want our committee to be successful. So this is just step one in trying to fulfill some of the vision that I had. So is there any more thoughts? Mr. Latham?
Well, and by the way, we have a final in the NCAA game. Kansas State did prevail over Michigan State, just for those who were caring about that. But no, I do like the idea actually of canvassing the membership for ideas that maybe aren't on our radar and they only feel comfortable in a forum to bring this up. But, again, coming back to the self-selecting, for example, would we want to put this committee's work up for a vote on one of the member discussion groups? And I would suggest that those familiar with those groups would suggest that we don't want that. Because again, it might be a demographic that may not even attend the convention. So we might not have a good fit between who participates in a meeting like this and at the convention. So just, again, I don't oppose it. I think for one, just there's a timing issue. But yeah, I also want to hear ideas from folks that may not be on our radar. I've had, by the way, some new ones come up just in contemplating some LNC activity and stuff that's come my way lately.
Oh, that's very frightening. Okay. Yeah, and when I had mentioned mock votes and things like that, it would be as we got closer, and it would be as presumptive of delegates as we could, because some states will have already elected their delegates. So I meant really close to convention. You know, we send out surveys, but we still ultimately make the decision because there is that self-selection bias. You are absolutely correct that sometimes the type of people who will answer a survey are not the same people who would come to convention. So it is a balancing act. Mr. Rogers.
I just wanted to ask, how would the format be different, even especially if we're gonna sort of, like, if there's not a big turnout and it's on one of our regular meeting days, then we can just get right to our own business. Or, you know, you only have one or two people that show up, they don't have any particular comments, and we can get right to business.
Yes.
So I would assume, though, because it's a town hall, each of the things that we've done so far, you would probably introduce and explain the rationale that we have and why we did what we did and solicit comment. And that would just eat up a lot of time. I'm just wondering how you think it'll, how do you envision it'll work?
This is how because I've done these for platform in the past. How I would envision it is in the email that goes out is there would be a little mini report that goes along with it that has our proposals and maybe a tiny little rationale. Maybe the rationale committee will want to work on something a little bit if we decide to do this. So I wouldn't necessarily introduce and explain because that documentation will have been provided to the members ahead of time. It'll be more soliciting them to talk and us to talk in response to members. Town halls tend to be a lot more member-led rather than committee-led. And Mr. Roberson, Madam Secretary, has entered. So I believe he would be our full 10.
Yes.
Okay, this is what I'm going to do then. If there's not an objection from the committee, is I'm going to set us for having a town hall. And if all 2 hours are not eaten up by a town hall, we can move on to business if we have quorum. For discussion with the members in that sort of kind of member-led discussion format where they would be in the invitation email, given a document that briefly explains our proposals, invites them to come to either discuss those proposals and or suggest some of their own, perhaps suggest improvements. So I'm going to set that then for 4/20, which I believe that would be a regular meeting date. Let me look at the bottom here. Yeah. So 4/20.
4/20, nice.
Yeah, because, you know, I'm hosting it from Colorado. So very nice. Very nice. All right. We are getting right to business then. We're on item number 5. Which is a new proposal, which is rising seconds. I have amended this since you've last seen it. I spoke briefly with Richard Brown earlier today. I spoke even longer yelling at JJ earlier. Now, we just always have an animated discussion, and he pointed out some flaws in my proposal, at least flaws for my intent, you know.
I feel left out.
Well, flaws aren't necessarily flaws. It depends on what you're intending to accomplish, you know. And when I explained what I was intending to accomplish, I realized, oh, it was on the ride home. But anyway, let's pull it up because this is going to look different to you guys, and there might be a better way to word it. So what I'm going to read what I have. I want to explain my intent and why the wording is the way it is. And perhaps something that I've been trying to come up with a better wording for, someone else will. So I'm pulling it up. And this would be an amendment to the standing rules. It would be to add to Rule 2, subsection 4. All main motions, I didn't change the language over to the side here. You could see what my original thing was. Ignore the third column. Data Logan just entered. I'm not sure, Madam Secretary, if that changes the voting order of the alternates. I'll leave that for you to let me know when we get to a vote.
Yes.
Okay, so you take care of that on the side and we'll update that when it comes time for a vote. So the current motion is all main motions and adhering subsidiary motions, as
Oh.
well as all motions to suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action originating from the floor require 20 seconds. Delegates shall stand to signify their second. Whole purpose of this obviously is to stop eating time on things that don't have any chance of passing. The classic example is, you know, the motion to declare Harry Potter the greatest book of all time. Motions, with all due respect to the Pro Wrestling Caucus, to have the chair race decided by mud wrestling. You know, even though I appreciated the resolution, birds aren't real, that sort of thing. Originally, I had said all original main motions, and JJ asked me what I was trying to accomplish with that. When I explained it, he said, take out the word original, because one thing I am trying to avoid here is people eating time with like a motion to amend something previously adopted, which isn't an original main motion. It's an incidental motion. So just all main motions. What I am not trying to do is to have things like points of order require 20 seconds. I believe this language does what I intended, that things will show a modicum of support before we move to debate, before we move to votes, which may even be close and require a counted vote. We're trying to have more effective conventions because we never get through all of our business. Now, why does it say originating from the floor? And here's where I think somebody might have some better wording. I do not intend for motions that come out of a committee to require any seconds. So for instance, our bylaws proposals, propose it, it's like normal. That doesn't require 20 seconds. It came out of a committee, it's treated like anything else. So that's why I said originating from the floor. I think actually that's the most graceful way to word it. The other thing I was thinking of is starting the sentence with the exception of proposals from the Bylaws and Rules Committee, Platform Committee, and Credentials Committee. However, that's many more words other than just originating from the floor. Because sometimes, and Mr. Brown can probably give even more examples. If the chair assumes a motion because they can read the room and see that's what's going on, I don't want that to require 20 seconds either, because it doesn't happen very often. So that's why I said originating from the floor. So if it comes from the chair, comes from the committee, it's treated like normal. I am not trying to solve every problem that the LP has with wasting time with this proposal. I'm trying to solve 60% of it. And I think this motion does that. But there might be better wording and there might be some questions. If you don't mind, committee, I'd like to hear from Mr. Brown first, just because this does involve parliamentary issues and he may have something, you know, that I'm missing here in my explanation, and then I'll go down the list. First up was Mr. Rogers, then I saw Mr. Seebeck, Mr. Molman, Mr. Latham. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I knew that you had this proposal, but I had not read it until just a few minutes ago. But I want to say that I concur with JJ's recommendation that you strike original and make it apply to all main motions. I think that's good advice. I concur, and I recommend the same thing for the reasons you put forward. And I understand making it apply only to motions from the floor. And your language may cover that. I just want to point out, and you probably know this, but others may not. California does require standing seconds, not just for main motions, but for amendments also. They require standing seconds of 10% of the delegates in attendance. And if they usually have about 100 delegates, that would be 10 people for a standing second. They do have a second section that says committee reports that contain proposed changes to the bylaws or these convention rules shall not require a standing second. You pretty much covered that, although you might want to consider a sentence that simply says committee reports shall not require a standing second. As far as I'm concerned, as a parliamentarian, the main issue, based on my experience having served as parliamentarian for the National Convention since 2016, and for several California conventions where they require standing seconds, it really is a time saver, and it helps to get rid of frivolous motions. I think something you need to decide is whether to make it apply just to main motions or to subsidiary and secondary motions. But I concur with JJ's advice with the change you made. That's all, unless you have questions.
And thank you, Mr. Brown. If you know, it did have adhering subsidiary motion, so it would cover amendments as well. Because there's some harebrained amendments sometimes too.
Okay, you did. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So I have Mr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you. So these motions originate from the floor. You know, my experience at the conventions is that there's a lot of hustle and bustle. There's a lot of people walking around, especially at the back. There are little groups standing and talking, and not everybody's following what's going on up at the podium. So I would suggest, I love the idea, love the motion, but maybe delegates shall stand with hand raised to signify their second, because the room is always full of people standing. And if this is something that just rose from the floor, and it's going to be a surprise to everybody. So you really need to not just be standing, but you ought to have your hand raised too, so that we know that you heard it, you understand it, and you're actually seconding it. So that's just a suggestion I have. Shall stand with hand raised, so that they're easier for the chair to identify. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And let me, and I do totally sympathize with what you're saying. I can tell you in the past, one issue we've had with that is people raising both of their hands to be counted twice, and you only have one body. But I also know that there will be an objection, as there was last convention, and because this is a standing rule, if there are people, we've had people before who are on wheelchairs, and somebody has said, what if they can't stand? I think we can deal with that on the fly like we did last time. But just, I mean, I would have no objection if somebody wanted to make that amendment. One thing, pardon me, committee one moment, that I didn't explain, and where I said, as well as all motions to suspend the rules and adopt. So a simple motion to suspend the rules would not require 20 seconds. It would just require a simple second. But libertarians have gotten wise to the fact that you can suspend the rules and do something. You can suspend the rules and adopt a bylaws amendment. You can suspend, and libertarians have figured that out, and they've counted on people not paying attention and thinking that they're just voting on suspending the rules and getting things passed that way. So I just wanted to point out why I stuck that in there, because people have gotten really wise to that trick. I wish Roberts didn't allow it. I think it's kind of snaky, but it's allowed, and libertarians have taken advantage of it. I think sometimes to good effect and sometimes to bad effect. Mr. Seebeck had your, did you lower?
You covered what I was going to say, so.
Oh, okay, thank you. Who was next? I said it and I didn't write it down. Was it you, Mr. Molman?
You had Melman, Latham, and then either Sylvia or Chuck Moulton after that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go Molman, Latham, Moulton, Arrowwood. Mr. Molman. You're muted, I think. Well, in any event, I can't hear you.
Being double muted is stupid. Anyway, all right. So here's what I was trying to say. Pulling this back up over here. I'm not making a motion to amend at this time, but I'm curious to find out if there's support for altering this to just simply say that all motions from the floor, I don't think we need the word originating, all motions from the floor require 20 persons to second, and just leave it at that, the end. Like, don't specify the form, don't specify what motion. If it comes from the floor, it requires 20 seconds. That's it. And I just think that's simpler language. And I do think that if we try to limit it and say that, well, in this scenario, you know, it's okay to have only 1 second, then people that are looking to be disruptive are still going to do that. And let's be real, most of the time, people looking to be disruptive, there's more than 20 of them anyway. But I think that in the spirit of what we're trying to do is to close a loophole and just say enough. You know, 1 or 2 people making a motion from the floor, even if it's a point of order is not a motion.
Yes, it is.
So any
That's
point
my
of
problem.
order-
Yes, it is, Mr. Molman. That's why I have a problem with what you said. This is one of the this is part of the lively discussion I had with Mr. Jacobs. It's motion to raise a point of order.
Interesting.
It's an incidental motion.
Um,
And there could be
guess-
others like that we're not thinking of that are questions of privilege.
Well, and I guess what I'm getting at is, and maybe I need to think about that wording a little bit more. That's interesting, but I think we should simplify it and make it apply to everything that's not a potential rights violation, right? So a point of order is usually raised to stop a violation of rights, whether minority. A point of order is usually a, hey, you're doing the things wrong and I'm negatively affected by it. Because nobody complains. Well, that's not true. Libertarians still complain, but most people don't complain when you're just doing it wrong, but they don't care because the outcome's the same as what they want. So I guess
Can
my
I
point
ask
is
you
that
a question, Mr. Molman?
Sure.
Because you may wish to make this amendment, and though you want a discussion, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead of everybody, please yell at me. What about all motions from the floor with the exception of points of order? That might
yeah, and or is orders of the day, is that a point of order as well? That's the other one I can think of that somebody might want to make, like, hey, we're out of time. But I think it would be a
Mr.
point of order.
These are privileges.
Let me, I don't think, it's not a point of order because it's not a violation of the bylaws. But it is I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything more to say, or I was going to move on to
No,
Mr.
I
Latham
guess
while you thought about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think just getting to it, I think the last sentence we can strike. However, the chair wants to count 20 people, cool. And I think it should apply to all motions except for those that would negatively affect the minority's right to be heard. Because that is an important thing that if the chair's running over people, they have the right to be like, whoa, hey, wait a second, I'm getting run over here. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, as you noted, as much as I enjoyed, and it brought some levity, it was kind of fun, the whole motion to have the chairs race or whatever decided in a cage match, I think it was. You know, you don't want to have too much of that. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Latham.
Yeah, and just following up on Mr. Melman's point, yeah, I do like that proposed amendment because that somewhat answers a concern I had just about standing, and his change would just allow the chair to recognize folks without and standing per se. And then I just also, there's a term in there as well as, and I'm wondering if that could be shortened to and. And then I do want to hear more about, I guess it's interesting to me that the point of order is a motion and may be affected by this proposal. And so I'm just wondering what other motions might be implicated by this
Well, it's
proposal.
not a main motion, it's
Right,
an
it's an
incidental.
incidental motion, yes.
So a point of order would not be affected by this
Right,
proposal.
that's
Okay.
why I worded it this way.
Okay, thank you.
I had after Mr. Latham, Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I definitely support the intent of this proposal. And I've seen it done in several state parties, which has been very useful. I would like to see the word in simpler. I support the thrust of what Mr. Molman wanted to do. As a Robert's Rules geek, this is the thing that frustrates me the most is when people want to make friendly amendments, which obviously you can't do. But the thing that frustrates me the second most is when someone will make a motion that clearly has no support, and someone else will say, "I will second for purposes of discussion."
Right.
When really they don't want to support it at all. And there's only one person who wants this. There really isn't any support, but other people want them to be heard, even when there's really no support. And I guess my concern is, even at the level of 20, are you going to have 20 people who are going to second for the purpose of discussion, even all sorts of frivolous things? So I don't want to make the number too high, but my worry is maybe 20 is too low.
Okay, unless somebody says they're actually amending, I'm assuming this is still just all discussion. Amendments might be forthcoming. Ms. Arrowood.
I just wanted to say, I heard people talking about raising hands. In Reno, we didn't raise our hand. We had placards that we would raise.
Those were, no, that was struck. We were given those, but there was a question. Those were actually declared illegal. It would have required a convention rule. It was a whole thing.
Oh,
That can be a rule that can be made, but it wasn't made for that convention. That was a unilateral decision of the credentialing committee that was completely improper.
all right. I didn't know that.
So they turned out to be delegation control devices, I think what they tried to call it. And they turned out to be souvenirs. You are speaking of this thing.
Yes.
Yeah, they couldn't control them. What if you lost it? What if somebody held up two? There was all kinds of issues with it. So they turned out to be nice souvenirs. Mr. Molman, did you intend to still have your hand raised?
Not really, but if there's other people wanting to speak, put me behind them. I do want to make an amendment, but I'm eating an apple at the moment.
Sure, I had Mr.
I don't really want to talk yet.
Okay, so Mr. Roberson, Mr. Molman, and then I will be raising my hand, even though Mr. Molman might be making an amendment that I'm thinking of. Mr. Roberson.
Hi, guys. Sorry, but if I missed this, I logged in late. I was curious how the number 20 came to be, choice versus percentage of delegates voting. Seemed arbitrary to me.
I wanted to pick something that was high enough to, I don't want a percentage because that requires a calculation, and then someone's going to challenge the calculation, and there will be quorum calls and it will waste more time. I wanted something that wasn't going to waste time and was going to discourage frivolous things. 20 just seemed like a decent number.
Makes
But
sense
it-
to me.
Yeah, it was somewhat arbitrary though, but it seemed reasonably arbitrary.
Fair enough, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Mr. Molman? And then I have myself after you, depending upon what you do.
That was a little quick. So before I make this motion, would you have strong objection to the percentage? And I only ask that because I do think there's a, I mean, we have credentials reports every time we come back from break. It's just one more calculation they have to make, right? Because it's the whole, what's 1/3, what's half, what's 2/3, what's.
Ooh. Okay. Are you asking me?
I am.
Okay, I would have a strong objection. I would tell you our credentials reports are done all wrong.
Well, I know that, but let's assume they weren't.
but they are, and they won't be. So when you say it's just another calculation, I'm going to be talking to the party chair, and the convention committee is going to be talking to the credentials person to say, don't be giving numbers that are meaningless. A majority of the entire membership might be a meaningful number, but a majority isn't meaningful anything because it's not a majority of those in the room. It's a majority of those present and voting. It's a meaningless number. 2/3 of registered delegates is a meaningless number because that's not what a 2/3 vote is. The only number that needs to be given with credentialing is 7/8. That's the only number that is in our bylaws as needing to be a registered delegates. Our credentials reports are thoroughly confusing and they confuse people constantly. And I would object to, besides our credentialing reports being wrong, I would object, and that's not the fault of the credentials chair, it's our custom. Our custom is wrong. I'm not blaming any credential committee chair or throwing any kind of shade on anyone. Even every state convention does this. I don't know how this crept into the Libertarian Party. However, I would object to a percentage because, again, I don't think that then saves time. People are going to start challenging the percentages. They're going to ask for counts. You know, I want simple. 20 is simple. And if we find out that still wastes time, then we raise it in the future. I think we have to remember with our proposals, we're not trying. A lot of them are kind of test balloons. And they work, or sometimes they need to be tweaked a little more. But if we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we also need to say what's going to pass. But if you want to make that amendment, it's perfectly your right to do so, Mr. Molman.
All right. And then I have one more quick question, important though. There's the whole delegates versus alternates thing. And somebody is eligible to vote sometimes, even though they're not a delegate, which is really weird to me. The way that's all done is super weird, as you just noted. So is delegates the wrong word to use, and what would be a good phrase to use?
I would ask Mr. Brown his opinion. I'm going to tell you mine first. Delegates is the word to use. The minute somebody, when somebody is an alternate and then gets to vote, they have become a delegate. They're no longer an alternate. They have moved to a delegate. It's just like when a regional alternate is voting, they're voting as the regional representative. They're provisional.
I agree with Ms. Harless. I think delegate is the proper word.
Then, all right, I do have a motion.
Okay.
Don't mind if I quit eating apples and stop choking. All right. I would like to move to amend. Probably the easiest way to do this is by substitution.
That's what I figured.
Punch
So
it
I
in
was,
after, yeah.
I was already copying it. Okay.
All right. All main motions from the floor, comma, and subsequent motions to amend such motions, that's terrible to say that way, whatever, comma, shall require 20 delegates to second. I don't like the way I have the motions twice in that phrase, but that's the best I got. That's the motion I'm making. I don't know.
Before you make it, can we pretend like you didn't? Because the way you didn't like your word,
Sure.
I might be able to give you a different idea, but it's up to you.
I have not heard a second, Madam Chair. So at this point, I could be like, well, wait a second, maybe I said that wrong.
Well,
And then we could
seconds aren't
chime in.
needed on committees, but I think we can still pretend.
Oh, damn it. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever.
I don't think you. Oh, now I forgot what I was going to say. I'll make motions from the floor and any,
Subsequent motions to amend such motions. Yeah. Any amendments?
and any amendments there too.
That's what I was trying to write. Yeah. And any amendments. Yeah, that'll work. There too is a perfect word. That's fine. Yeah.
That's pretty much the wording they use in California. They say motions from the floor and amendments. It's really simple the way California worded it.
So this is what I have. Let me take out that 7 and 8 there. The first paragraph is my motion, or the primary motion. It now belongs to the body. The bottom is your substitution. Is that correct, Mr. Mulman? Is that how you were envisioning it?
I am trying to read it, but I am on my phone and it hates me. Hold on, here we go. And I'm also blind. There we go. All main motions from the floor, comma, and any amendments thereto, comma, shall require 20 delegates a second. That looks beautiful. That's perfect. It's almost like I had good input and help on crafting that and overcoming my good Kentucky grammar. Anyway, yeah, that's my motion. That's totally it.
Okay. So we now have a motion, a primary motion and a substitute. The way the procedure works is we perfect the primary motion first. Then we move on to perfect the substitute motion. Then they're both open to amendment. Then we decide between the two. We should be old hat at this now, since substitutes are my parliamentary kink. So amendments are open to the primary, which is good because I had my hand raised and I did want to amend the primary. And my motion to amend is to strike delegates shall stand to signify their second. So let me just strike through that. I think people have spoke why that's a good idea, so I don't need to speak to it. So right now, debate and discussion is on the amendment to the primary. Mr. Latham, did you wish to speak to that or be in line for something else?
In line for an amendment, which is in the chat. It's pretty close to what
Is it to
going
the
on.
Primary or
No,
to?
well, I mean, I guess when you say primary, the top paragraph,
Yes, the top paragraph is the primary.
then yeah, I guess it is. And just the proposal is to replace as well as with and then
Okay.
I guess
Okay, so we have to, I see what you want to do. So I will call upon you immediately when that's in order. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this amendment to the primary motion, which is to strike the sentence, delegates shall stand to signify their second? Is there any objection to this amendment to the primary motion? Hearing none, that sentence is stricken. Now, your amendment is in order, Mr. Latham, and from what I understand, instead of as well as, you want to strike as well as all, or, oh no, just strike as well as and insert and? Am I?
yes, although I'm now looking by doing that, when we get to the word rules, it says suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action. So I'm now wondering if that's a list, and do we need a serial comma? So I guess that's my query to the sponsor. Is that what's going on here? Are these a series of things that are being included in a list?
Okay. You're dealing with the Chicago manual style thing here. No, what I don't even know how to grammatically explain this. You have like a semicolon probably would be technically required after the phrase subsidiary motions, because what you have is a group, main motions and adhering subsidiary motions. And then something else that's a single item, but the single item consists of two actions, which is suspending the rules and adopting a certain proposition or taking a particular action. That's why I kind of think as well as is better there, because you avoid that whole thing.
Okay, well, maybe I will set that proposed amendment aside, but then get to the next part. And I just heard Mr. Molman say it. I thought it sounded nice to me, but maybe I would like to hear from others as to whether one is preferred to the other. So it's just this term of art, 20 seconds or 20 delegates to second, or is the phrase I heard and liked, the seconds of 20 delegates. So that would be, my proposal is to replace 20 seconds with the seconds of 20 delegates.
Are you asking for input or are you making a motion? I'm unclear.
I'll make the motion and then I guess we can hear people give their input.
Okay, so it is to, tell me again, originating from the floor.
All main motions originated from the floor require, and then it would say the seconds of 20 delegates.
Okay, I'm going to do this just easier than trying to. So we're going to strike that. Format text, strike the require the seconds of, we're using 20 delegates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We are now in debate on that. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to give my input. I like your other wording better. I like actually Mr. Molman's wording. If we were going to amend that, I would rather us vote this down and instead move to say originating from the floor shall require 20 delegates to second. I think that sounds less Jane Austen. And I love Jane Austen, but just it sounds a bit stilted in modern parlance. Would anyone like to speak further? So in other words, I'm recommending voting this down and I'm going to make that other amendment, or Mr. Latham might if it's voted down.
Okay, and didn't we, I don't know if we did this last time where we made conforming amendments on both. So just if I understand, you're saying that on this second paragraph, the 20 delegates to second, that would be preferable to the seconds of 20 delegates.
Yes,
So,
I think so.
Gotcha. Let me make that motion then instead.
Well, let me ask, is there any objection to Mr. Latham withdrawing his amendment and instead making it say requires 20 delegates to second? Or is it requires?
I
Do you
think
want
it's just
shall require? No,
require.
require 20 delegates to second. Okay.
Yeah, for the top one.
I do not see any objection to you withdrawing and instead making that other one. So let's go back. So require 20, and then we're delegates to I'm trying to do this so that I can make it clear what's changing. I have to use my inventive format that Sylvia was asking me about, what was purple and all that. That was me cheating. Require 20. This is, I think, what we just changed. So it would end up reading, originating from the floor, require 20 delegates to second. Is there any further discussion on that amendment to the primary motion? Hearing none, is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing no objection, Madam Secretary, Paul Bracco has entered. So what I'd like to do at this point, if you could almost give like what would be a updated like credentials report now, who of the primaries are here and who of the alternates, in case we get to a roll call vote. It doesn't matter for debate, everyone as well. You know, everyone, the alternates and primaries are welcome to debate, but in case we need to do a roll call, I'd like to know where we're at. And while you're doing that, Ms. Arrowood, Mr. Bracco raised his hand.
Just, I don't know if this is in order or not. So if it's not, then ignore me. But given that I'm kind of jumping in halfway through discussions on this proposal, would it be possible for me to be an audience member until we get past proposal J?
Yeah, if we come to a roll call vote, you'll just say you defer to the next.
Okay.
You can defer to an alternate. You always can defer to an alternate.
Okay, thank you.
So Ms. Arrowood? No pressure.
She's muted.
Ms. Arrowood, you've been muted. If you've been talking to yourself.
Oh, and get good answers that way. Okay, Arrowood here. Bracco is not here for this particular motion.
But he is here. He will have
But
to.
he is here. Yeah, I'm going to show him. Okay. Sazelski is here. Harlos is here. Latham is here. Martin is here. Molman is here. Tom Roulette is not here. So I have Logan would be there for this particular vote. And Rufo is not here. So
what I'm asking is, who are the automatically seated alternates? And if Mr.
the
Bracco,
alternates at this point are Chuck Moulton and Dave Roberson.
okay. And if Mr. Bracco ends up deferring, who's the next in line?
That would be the third person would be Roberson.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Are there any further amendments to the primary motion? I'll read it aloud just to make sure. Sometimes reading things aloud gives you different ideas. All main motions and adhering subsidiary motions, as well as all motions to suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action originating from the floor, require 20 delegates to second. All right, hearing no further amendments on that, we are moving to the substitute. We're not really debating between the two right now. We're just perfecting it. So Are there any amendments to the substitute? Mr. Molman?
Yes. So trying to look at the substantive differences here, I just put up Roberts and looked at what is the main and incident, you know, the different types of motions. And I guess the question, I'm trying to look here, the original would apply to the suspension of the rules but only to adopt certain proposition or take a particular action.
Correct. Not just the
second-
suspension of the rules.
Right. So a suspension of the rules itself is not a main motion. I guess my question is, if it's a combined motion, if it is a motion to suspend the rules and do a thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's combined, would it still
It would still
would
be
not
an
be a main
instant.
motion?
It would
Still a
still
main
not be it's sneaking in a main motion though. That's why I added it.
It is.
It's smuggling
Right,
in a
and
main
that's-
motion.
Because that's exactly what I'm looking for. The characteristics of a main motion, number 5 is debatable. And when you do a combined, it's not debatable.
Exactly.
So it can't be, and that's why I was thinking about that. And I'm like, well, maybe we want to add that phrase to this second one as well, just because the intent and because of the, back door, as it were. Motions from the floor, any amendments there too? Any main motions to the floor? Any amendments there too? The upside of that is, I don't actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it alone, because even if it only takes a voice vote, and to suspend the rules takes 2/3, and as one who sat there at the, on stage, you can tell 2/3 pretty easily. 1 or 2 people being the ding dong is one thing. 2/3 is quick. It's going to be a voice vote and it'll be done.
I'm going to
So-
tell you something that's going to blow your mind. You're not
Okay.
ever supposed to take a 2/3 vote by a voice vote.
I know.
Oh, I am going to be raising that next convention, because male voices are louder than
Yeah.
female voices. And it really does disadvantage the female delegates. They boom more. And that's the reason for it too. But yeah, you're never supposed to take, and I'm going to tell you something else that's going to blow your mind, and Richard's going to nod because he knows we haven't done this either. All final votes on adopting bylaws are supposed to be counted.
I mean, it makes sense, but ouch.
We've
Nope,
never
we're doing
followed it.
electronically.
We've
No.
never followed it, but it's in Roberts.
Yeah. All right.
You sure,
I'm
Karen?
gonna leave my motion.
Oh yeah, I am. I can find that for you. It's quite obscure.
Going to be buried. I'll go play and look there too. But I'm going to leave mine alone. I'm going to actually just leave it be. I
I
agree
think
that
it's
it
a
takes the
should and
2/3,
not a
but-
must, Mr. Brown, but it is a should. I'm sorry, Mr. Mullen.
Yeah, you're fine. I enjoy the parliamentary stuff too. But I'm going to go look for that myself. But the point, I guess, is that I'm going to leave it be. If somebody else believes it's necessary or wants it, they can move to amend to put it in there. But I'm just going to leave it be.
Okay, I have Mr.
That's
Latham.
what I thought about it.
So this is a question. So as I'm just looking at the main motion, so the phrase "or take a particular action," is that to be read in conjunction with what is before it in the clause? So motions to suspend the rules and so motion to suspend the rules, I guess, and take a particular action, because
Or adopt. Yeah.
because if it obviously, if it stands by itself, that's quite broad. Having said that, I don't know that 20 delegates is still okay by me, but I just want to clarify whether we are really making it that broad.
we're gonna wait till we're debating between the two, because right now where we're at is amendments to the bottom one, unless that question is because you're thinking of amending the bottom one.
Okay,
don't-
well, just
I
it's
don't
a
know.
question on my mind, so at some point in time,
Yeah,
I hope we answer it.
Mr. Brown.
I forgot I had my hand raised. I think I just wanted to make the comment that, again, having served as a parliamentarian for several conventions and also for several state conventions, that I really think it's a good idea to make this rule apply to motions, to suspend the rules and adopt a motion, or as Mimi Robeson in California says, to suspend the rules and do the thing.
That all came from Nick Sarwark, actually. The "do the thing" is very much a Sarwarkian phrase. I like it, but it's kind of his signature.
Also, Madam Chair, just as a grammatical point, I think the two commas in the substitute motion really do not belong with it in its present form. I think should not be any commas. Now, if it gets amended, that may
Motion
change
from the
things.
floor and any amendments there. I think, Mr. Mullman, do you have I think grammatically, Mr. Brown is correct.
Where is it at? Sorry.
He doesn't believe there should be any commas in your substitute.
I'm a comma freak. I put commas everywhere, but I'm super Oxford comma. I don't know.
This isn't an Oxford
I
thing,
don't
though.
care.
Those are emphasis commas and they're optional.
Yeah, I think. Although actually the motion I'm planning to make to amend, I think would require it, because if I put any motions from the floor, all main motions from the floor and another type, or another type, comma, and any amendments there too, comma, I think might make that necessary. But I'm not,
Yeah.
I grew up in Kentucky. I speak good. So.
And that's why I said that, any amendments may change that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to find, since Mr. Brown, since you're there, is combined motion the correct terminology, the Roberts correct way to say a motion to suspend the rules to do a thing?
No.
I've
There's no
never heard it.
Roberts.
I've never heard it expressed that way. I don't think Robert expresses it that way. No.
I'm trying to find incidental motion. Incidental main motion. Incidental main motion corresponding to subsidiary motions. Corresponding incidental main motion. So would incidental main motion cover it? Any main motion or incidental main motion?
An incidental
I'm
main
trying to
motion
find a
is
way to
main
say this
motion.
easy.
An incidental main motion is not the same as an incidental motion.
It becomes a main motion. Yeah.
So no, wouldn't. I think you're getting into the whole big thing I got into with JJ earlier. It had all kinds of unintended consequences.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way to say what you're saying, but maybe shorter. But if there's no way, then I guess my point is I see the loophole. I'd like to make sure the loophole's not there. I'm just trying to find a way to say it.
Okay, there's two things that I want to read to everybody, if the committee will grant me. First of all, to Mr. Brown, the final vote on a bylaw amendment should be counted and recorded in the minutes unless it is nearly unanimous, is Roberts 57-9. It's a little obscure rule that I read and I was like, oh, okay, but I want to read to you all something really important that I think we're losing our way on with bylaws. Maybe you can help me. I'm looking for where it talks about writing bylaws, composition of writing style. 5611, I think, is what I'm looking for.
Madam Chair, I think I found what Mr. Melman was talking about in Roberts. It may be in other places, but it's in 25:4.
Okay, we'll look at that in one moment, but there's something that
Okay.
I want to read to everybody. The composition of bylaws is somewhat different from ordinary expository writing in that it places greater demand on a tight clarity and precision in word choice, sentence structure, and punctuation. In bylaws, every punctuation mark may have an important effect, and what is omitted may carry as much significance as what is included. Indisputability of meaning and application is more important consideration than readability, and the latter must be sacrificed when both cannot be achieved. I think we're losing our way a little bit on this, where we are becoming the brevity caucus and thinking shorter is always better. It is better to be longer and clearer. I'm just warning everyone with this. I think we're starting to see this here. I agree that the first one is a little more convoluted, but I'm asking the committee, what do we want to do and what says it the clearest? That's up to you guys. But when we're starting to get into, is this an incidental? You know, remember also ordinary, well, I think I've made my point that don't always think shorter is better, because it isn't. It might be in a certain case, because longer might make it more confusing. But precision of meaning is more important than less words. Mr. Molman.
Yeah, and I fall into the brevity caucus side of things, but also the precision of words. And that's actually what I'm going for. My concern being that the longer the rules are, the less likely, and we saw this in Kentucky several years back when our rules ballooned to 44 pages. Literally no one knew them all. It was convoluted. It was a split document, which made things even worse. And we couldn't, nobody knew all the rules. And we cut everything down, and we did make too drastic a cuts, and we've kind of fixed that. But the point is that I want it to be precise, but using as few words as possible without sacrificing the precision, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm searching for this word and looking at the 25-4 and the combined motions, two motions that are combined. It's I'm just trying to find a way to say this precisely, but also short, so that in theory, again, the shorter they are, and we've seen this in Kentucky based on the size of our bylaws over time, as they've gone from 7 pages to 44 and back down and whatnot. The fewer pages there are, the more likely it is everyone's actually read them. So on that, the 25-4, the foregoing is an exception to the general rule. Okay. So I guess I'm going to ask the parliamentarian.
Well, you asked the chair, who might ask the parliamentarian.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Then I would like to ask the chair to ask the parliamentarian what is the proper term for two motions that can be combined when one, well, I mean, yeah, one of the motions is a main motion. What would combined motion, or is it?
There is no term for what you are looking for in Roberts.
Yeah, actually, RONR in that section 23:4 does refer to combining the motion to suspend the rules with another motion, which is an exception to the general principle that somebody cannot make two motions at once. The actual language is, let me read it here. When the purpose of the motion to suspend the rules is to permit the making of another motion, and the adoption of the first motion would obviously be followed by the adoption of the second. The two motions can be combined, as in open quotes, to suspend the rules and take from the table a certain motion. The foregoing is an exception to the general rule that no member can make two motions at the same time, except with the consent of the assembly.
But
They
I think
basically
what he-
refer to it as combining motions. You're combining the motion to suspend the rules with the motion to do something.
But it isn't a term of art combined motion, like you're
Correct.
not gonna
correct.
look in the index to Roberts and see that. It's not a
That's right.
term of art. It's just saying what you're doing. You're combining two motions, but it isn't some special thing called a combined motion. It's an
Yep.
exception to a general rule.
And on that issue, I do like the wording in the original motion, but on that particular point.
And also, Mr. Mullen, I just want to tell you an implication, and it might be one that you want. It's one that I kind of struggled with. Your main motions and any amendments there too shall require 20 delegates. It's only amendments. Mine says adhering subsidiary motions. That's a broader category than amendment. There's a lot more, there's
That's
more
true.
differences between the two. An adhering subsidiary motion would be to lay on the table. There are others. So there's more differences between the two than just the thing about suspending the rules.
All right.
Mr. Latham.
Yeah, and maybe just to riff off of your comment. So for those of us who aren't registered parliamentarians, I'm actually looking at Roberts and looking at the table of contents on small 11, and it talks about the main motion, but then subsidiary motions is not just the motion to amend, which is section 12, but there's postpone indefinitely, section 11, commit or refer, section 13, postpone to a certain time, section 14, limit or extend limits of debate, section 15, previous question 16, 17 is lay on the table. And then we don't even get to suspend the rules until section 25. So yeah, the Mullen proposal is pretty narrow. All main motions from the floor and any amendments there too. You're just getting section 10 and section 12 of that table of contents, whereas the other motion is broader. So that,
And we might want to be more narrow. Maybe that'll have a better chance of passing. I just wanted to point out that there was more differences than just the one thing that we were focusing on. I'm going to answer a question just from the gallery. We're doing more than just the suspend the rules, Mr. Robinson. We're talking about all kinds of motions. That's just part of it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. And without objection, Mr. Robinson?
I'm simply entering that in the chat to see if anyone else would agree that this would be a useful substitution. I'm not introducing it at this time as a motion. If there is no other support for it, then I will not offer it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Robinson, the motions can only be offered by committee members, but I do understand you are inviting a committee member to consider this as a potential motion. I was just explaining that the motions, at least on the floor now, do a lot more than just that, but perhaps you are suggesting that the only problem we should be looking at is suspending the rules and doing a thing. I can tell you as the original proposer, that was kind of an afterthought to me. I'm more concerned about other kinds of motions. I'm concerned about them both, but I didn't even add this language about suspending the rules and stuff until today. When I originally wrote this thing, it was a month and a half, 2 months ago. Mr. Latham.
Yeah, and I just think Mr. Robinson's proposal is included in your original proposal, but of course there's more there. So I just wanted to spell that out if I'm reading that right.
But I think maybe perhaps Mr. Robinson is thinking that the only problem that is a real problem is that rather than everything else. Mr. Brown, you had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. By the way, I commend you for thinking of applying this to a motion to suspend the rules and do the thing. I would not have thought to do that, but I think it is good to do. However, I think I need to point out for everybody that a motion to suspend the rules and adopt a motion, as Nick Sarwark and Mimi Robeson would say, to suspend the rules and do the thing, it is non-debatable. You have to go straight to a vote. So you're not wasting a bunch of time in debating it. You know, nobody has to make a motion for the previous question. You just go straight to a vote. So even though when the delegates get carried away with making those combined motions, it ultimately wastes time. Each one can be disposed of fairly quickly. They're voted up or down in a hurry without debate.
And if I could just answer Mr. Brown, because I think I may have misled the committee inadvertently a little bit. Wasting time is my biggest issue here. But when I added this, I also added in debate, though I may not have emphasized it enough. There also was two other points. One was getting things passed because people aren't paying attention. And I know that's their fault, but I do sometimes get a little paternalistic and want to protect people from themselves. And they think they're just suspending the rules, not just suspending the rules and doing the thing. And they often vote for it because they think there's going to be a second vote on the thing. That's one. And the other is sometimes the thing is a very good thing to do, but people get frustrated and upset by trying to do it in one thing that it kills the thing. Whereas if people are discouraged from doing this, more good things that actually should be done will be done by taking the time to do it in 2 steps. Mr. Molman. But we are I go to Mr. Molman and then I'm going to rein things in a little bit. Mr. Molman.
Yep. All right, I'm going to make a motion to amend because substantively, I think kind of 2 directions to go. And I think this one currently is not in a spot where it needs to be. So it's going to be really easy. We're going to strike the word main. And then we're going to strike everything between the first set of commas. Strike the word main. So all motions from the floor is how it would read.
You know, this is going
And
to
then strike
include points of order.
That is correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Yeah.
All
Nope,
motions from the floor.
Yep, all motions from the floor. And then that'll also include amendments. So just go ahead and strike from comma to comma. Yep. And the more I thought about this, the more I thought about the presiding officer themselves having to remember what type of motion is this? Oh, it's this type of motion. So that means we do stand this time, we don't stand this time. It's going to increase the confusion on the presiding officer's part if we start saying this type of motion and that type of motion, but not this motion and not that motion. If it's consistent, 20 people, it'll be something where the audience knows when a motion's made from the floor. No matter what happens, somebody comes to the mic and says, I move to do a thing, then 20 other people or 20 other people have to stand up and go, yep, I agree with the thing. And it'll become clockwork. It'll be actually easier on the delegates because they'll know 20 people have to second it no matter what.
I'm going to put myself in line after Dr. Moulton. Dr. Moulton.
I support this amendment. It simplifies it more. I completely agree. I'll be voting in favor.
Okay, myself, I couldn't disagree more strongly with this motion. I would, to require a point of order for someone to even get to make it and argue their point to require 20 delegates is offensive to my libertarian sensibilities. I mean, I could just tell you the committee's going to do what the committee's going to do, but this will be, if this passes, a motion I will not argue for as committee chair. I will take a minority position and give it to Mr. Molman to argue, or whoever else the committee chooses. I think this is a gross violation of member rights. Mr. Seebeck.
I wouldn't vote for this either, for those reasons and even a little more. What is a point of personal privilege? Is that also a motion in the same vein as a point of order?
It is.
So we have that issue. Objection to consideration of the question. That, you know, a motion to, well, postpone and adjourn and those so on, obviously, but you're getting into the idea here of every motion requiring a second, including some that traditionally shouldn't require it. Point of personal privilege, can we turn off the air conditioning? Should not require 20 seconds, guys. So I think this is throwing baby out with bathwater here, and it's not a good idea. And if this passes, I would join a minority report against this.
And let me just say something else. Per Roberts, a motion that's on two unrelated questions is divisible upon the demand of a single member. I think this could impact that. I think all kinds of trickery can be imported with this. Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I'm not making this amendment yet. I'm not even sure if I can amend this many levels, but if we said all motions from the floor that traditionally require a second shall require 20 delegates to second, would that exclude things like point of order, point of parliamentary procedure, things like that?
No, it would not, because points of order require a second traditionally, and I think in every parliamentary authority, but at least in our parliamentary authority, they do. I think the only thing it doesn't require a second, Mr. Brown can let me know, is there's certain things that can be done upon the demand of a single member. And I know one of them is division of a motion that is on two entirely unrelated subjects. There might be others. That's the one that comes to mind. Mr. Molman?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the concerns. I think specifically the issue of point of personal privilege. Well, once you get up and make the point of personal privilege, whether or not 20 other people say, yeah, I agree or not, doesn't really matter, because personal privilege doesn't change anything. It's asking for something to change, but it doesn't require anything. I think the main thing is that anything can be abused. I think that if we carve out an exception for any type of motion, then anyone looking to be a dork that doesn't have 20 people, maybe they only have 15, will use everything that doesn't have the 20 revision and keep making those motions, and they'll make them circularly so it's not dilatory, because 15 people doing dumb stuff over and over and over is a lot harder to call dilatory on than one person doing dumb stuff over and over. I think that the more I thought about it, I actually think it really will make it easier on delegates to know whenever anybody makes a motion, if you support it, you got to stand up first, or at least hearing from it. And 20 people in a body of 1,000 is actually, it's more 1,000, is less than 2% of the entire body. If you can't get 2% to second your motion, that shit ain't gonna pass. So I'm just saying. Anyway, that's my point on it.
Okay, I'm not sure who I think it was myself, Latham, Seebeck. On most things I would
Yep,
agree with
that's right.
you. Were you first, Mr. Seebeck?
No, you were right.
Okay. On most things I would agree with you, Mr. Molman, but points of order I do not, because points of order are arcane very often. And people tend to trust and believe the chair. Somebody raises a point of order and the knee-jerk reaction, particularly of a likable chair, is for people to just want to move on and let the chair have their way. But if the person gets at least the second and gets the opportunity to argue their case, there's the biblical proverb that says one man seems right until another man gets to argue his case. For arcane things, that could create continuing breaches of the bylaws. And I see Sylvia, I see you like waving and waving at me. I don't know why, but it's, I'll get you in one moment because I'm getting extremely distracted. On things that can potentially render a convention invalid, or an election invalid, or a bylaws amendment invalid. Things like points of order that are so serious should not require 20 people. People should be allowed to make their argument on a points of order. This is not only something that I'm disagreeing with as a matter of principle, I'm disagreeing with this as a matter of existential policy of this party, seeing all the crap that's happened with state parties with continuing breaches. Because as long as the person had the opportunity to raise that point of order and they had to do it timely, they've now preserved it. You can agree with all this could create legal problems. Having this apply to points of order is an existential disaster for this party in the making. As I said, when the LNC I thought was ignoring COVID, where I said the English language does not have words to convey my horror. That's how I feel right now about requiring 20 for a point of order. Other things, maybe, okay, I might not like it, but not a point of order. There could be others, but points of order can destroy a convention. Point of order can destroy the party. Like, my God, with everything I'm dealing with these state parties, like, I'm feeling a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach over the unintended consequences of this. Who did I say was next? Because I started to get a little histrionic there. Mr. Latham, or was it Mr. Seebeck? Mr. Latham, then Mr. Seebeck.
Sure. So I'm looking in Roberts at T44, and it has basically a list of items, motions which are in order when another has the floor and do not require a second. Point of order is included in there. Call for a division of the assembly is in there. Call for a separate vote. Call for the orders of the day. Calling a member to order. Parliamentary inquiry. Raise a question of privilege. Request for information. Request to be excused from a duty. And one more. Requests or motions to grant the request of another member. So
which section are you reading that from? John?
This is T as in Tom 44. So it's in the very end in the grade section.
Okay, I've got it. Never mind.
So I think that echoes, Mr. Brown, the point you made in the chat. So that did make me curious. But I worry then that the instant motion in front of us would basically change that calculus and now say that we do need 20 delegates to second those kind of things. So that's problematic for me. So I think the concerns raised by the chair and others make me lean against this proposal.
And let me correct myself. I was speaking in shorthand. To actually make the point of order does not require a second. To appeal from the point of order does. And that's what I meant, because you say point of order, member briefly state your point of order. The chair, blah, blah, blah. The chair goes, your point of order is not well taken. The member has not yet been able to argue against, because they don't know what the chair is going to say yet. And in order to appeal and get to make your argument, That is what I meant requires the second and is an existential threat to the organization. I was speaking in shorthand. I thank you for the correction. Actually making the point of order, you can yell that out from your seat. You don't even need to be at a microphone. But if you once the chair rules and you are going to appeal, that requires a second. Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, I want to address something Mr. Melman raised. Yeah, we could have some people on the floor try to exploit this, but let's be realistic. It's an accepted risk of having that type of parliamentary foosball being played. And by the way, that's my printer in the background. I apologize. And it just comes with the turf. We can't have the perfect here be the enemy of the good. And we just have to deal with the people who try to exploit it and so on when they happen. That's just the way it happens. God knows how much times I've dealt with that in conventions, and I think we all have. It's just something we have to live with the best we can. But let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good here, and let's just keep it to the main motions.
Mr. Molman.
I was going to ask go last, but I guess going back to the main point, I think actually the strongest point I made before. If you can't get 2% of the body, you agree to at least let your thing be heard. What makes you think that you're going to have a 49-point swing in getting it passed? Or if it takes 2/3, a 65-point swing to get it passed? That is a hell of a big swing. I don't know. I just think you're going to have people using whatever avenue, and especially people that, as we saw and have seen at other conventions, who lose a particular fight, just decide to be ding dongs and be a pain in the butt. And that's not just the last one. It's been before too. And I don't know, whatever. I just don't see that a 49-point or a 65-point swing is actually reasonable at convention. If you can't even get the 2% to be heard, your shit ain't gonna pass. That's all.
I wanted to bring up something Mr. Latham brought up. Because I was very eager to correct my error about the appeal. But Mr. Latham is also correct, and that this will now require 20 delegates to second things that required no second. So to even make a point of order now, allegedly, could be an unintended consequence of this, that to even make it, to get a ruling from the chair, would require 20 delegates to second because of page T44 of the things that don't require a second. I think that's an unintended consequence here. But forget about that for a second. I think Mr. Molman's mistaken when he's using his percentages of 49, 50, because he's assuming that everyone present on the floor is going to vote, and everyone on the present on the floor does not vote. And realistically, you're talking about maybe 20, 30%, because a lot of people abstain on things, particularly on more arcane things that they don't understand. But when you're talking about something that can be a continuing breach of the bylaws, the debate needs to be allowed to be had very easily. It isn't in this issue a matter of passing or not passing. It is in this issue a matter of preserving the fundamental integrity of the organization. The fundamental integrity of the organization is not threatened if someone doesn't get to say that Harry Potter is the greatest book of all time. But the fundamental integrity of the organization can be compromised if the election of the officers is done improperly. But people just trust the chair because there is the organizational inertia in favor of a likable chair. And you shouldn't have to get 20 people to be like, oh my God, you know, whatever, I just want to move on. When you're dealing with potential continual breaches of the bylaws, there are some things you cut corners on and you're okay. We want to save time here. One thing you do not cut corners on is that issue. I don't know who was first, but I haven't heard from Ms. Arrowwood in a while. So I'm going to hear from Ms. Arrowwood, then Dr. Moulton, then Mr. Molman.
What I was going to say has already been stated, and that is that a point of order does not require a second. It does require the chair to give a response. If you don't agree with the response, you could appeal. The appeal does take a second, and if this goes through, it would take 20 seconds. And you had already mentioned the continuing breach. That's a little bit of a different situation.
Okay,
But
Dr. Okay, sorry, Ms.
I
Arrowwood.
was just going to say that's at 23-4.
Okay, Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I just want to repeat what I said earlier, which is we could just add the phrase that traditionally require a second or something like that to take care of not the problem of appeals, but the problem of just point of order or point of parliamentary procedure or whatever. And again, I really like Mr. Molman's proposal, the substitute and the amendment here better than the main motion. I think the shorter we can get, the better. And I agree with all of his points. But yeah, we shouldn't. I think that this will work and can be fixed and can satisfy everyone.
Mr. Molman.
Yeah, as Dr. Moulton just pointed out, I am amenable to adding the phrase that require a second to this. I can't do it right now because we're already in a proposed amendment, but I'm absolutely amenable to that. It is not my intent to stop debate. It is to stop frivolous debate. I do actually, Ms. Irwin pointed out the appealing of the ruling of the chair. I mean, if there's not 20 people that are willing to appeal the ruling of the chair, first of all, if you're appealing the ruling of the chair, that usually that's made people say, I appeal the ruling of the chair on the whatever, right? People do that all the time. So you know what the basis is. And then the chair makes their ruling. Well, the person's already said what the appeal was. And if
No, you're
20
no,
people.
I gotta stop you for 1 second because
Okay.
we're starting to repeat ourselves. And even though there is no calling the question on committees, it is my responsibility to stop when things are getting dilatory. That is not in fact correct, though. You say, Mr. Chair, I raise a point of order. Chair goes, Delegate X, what is your point of order? My point of order is that this motion didn't have a second. I don't know. I'm just making up something. They don't say their appeal yet because they don't know what the chair is going to say. The chair then says, Delegate X, your appeal, your point of order is well taken. Is there a second on this motion? Or Delegate X, your point of order is not well taken because whatever. And he moves on to the next person. You have not heard the argument from the person. You've heard what their point of order is. You have not heard what their argument is. That's not how it works.
I agree that they've stated what their particular point of order or whatever is. And at that point, there's either merit to it or not. As noted earlier, there are plenty of people that do yeah, I disagree with this, but I'll just go ahead and second it in order to hear it out. And that's already a thing anyway. Genuinely, I think a whole lot of this, I mean, not trying to make the perfect the enemy of the good here, but I think any caucus that's trying to cause problems is going to be bigger than 20 people anyway. So no matter what we're arguing over is never going to apply because the number's not high enough. But it's whatever. The point, I guess, is that I don't believe for a moment that 20 libertarians in a group of 1,000 are going to let something fly, even if they agree with the outcome, if the procedure is wrong, because we are such nerds for procedure that there will be 20 people running to the microphones, much less you know, to be the first one to call it out. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think 20 people, I think it's not going to be too low anyway. And none of this is going to matter anyway, but I don't know. I just think it's easier if everybody knew when a motion's made from the floor, you support it or you don't, raise your hand. Just be easier, because then it won't be, wait, that was the, what type of motion? Oh, that was that type of motion? Oh, that was a combined motion? That was, yeah, anyway. I'm done arguing on this. I hope it passes, and then we'll try to get the amendment with the, getting on the
We
part
are
about,
running up
that
on,
require a second.
because we're also running up
Yeah.
on time. I would love to see us dispose of this one way or another, not just your amendment, the whole thing, but that's going to be up to you guys. Is there any further debate on Mr. Molman's amendment to the substitute? I'm assuming you meant to put your hand down, Mr. Molman. I see your little yellow hand. It's so adorable.
Oh, yep, sorry. Pardon.
Ms. Arrowwood?
I was going to say that someone had suggested using the word traditionally or tradition. That's the lowest rung in Roberts as to rules.
We're not there though. We're at one level of amendment. So we're dealing just with the words that are on the page right now.
All right.
Okay, there's contention obviously on this amendment, so we're going to go to a roll call vote. Mr. Bracco, you will be called upon if you feel that you've heard enough of the debate to vote. Please feel free to, otherwise defer then to the next ranking alternate. The motion before us is on the substitute only to delete the word main, and also and any amendments thereto, so that if the amendment is passed, the substitute will read, all motions from the floor shall require 20 delegates to second. Ms. Arrowwood, if you could take a roll call vote.
Arrowwood, I vote yes. Mr. Bracco, do you care to vote?
No, ma'am, I would like to defer.
All right, I'll call on Mr. Molman. I'm sorry, Moulton.
It's Dr. Moulton, by the way.
Dr. Moulton.
I vote yes.
All right. Mr. Sizelski,
I'm sorry, I missed what exactly we're voting on.
It's the language in red in the substitute only to strike the word main and any amendments thereto.
I vote no.
no. Latham, Rob Latham,
Also a no.
Frank Martin,
No.
Ken Molman,
Yes.
Mr. Data Logan,
No.
right? Mr. Roberson, David Roberson.
I think he dropped off.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Okay, I'll come back. Mr. Seebeck.
No.
All right, I'll call Mr. Roberson again. All right. The vote is 3 yes and 5 no. Do you care to vote, Madam Chair?
No, thank you.
All right.
So we are back to the substitute as not amended. Are there any further amendments to the substitute? Okay, seeing no further amendments to the substitute, where we are at now is debate between the two. I see Dr. Moulton. I think maybe I called this too quickly. Dr. Moulton?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment. So following there too, I would like to insert the language that require a second.
Hold on.
I'm just going to put that in purple to show.
There too.
Whoops.
And
Would you like to
but before I officially make that, let me just clarify. Without the deletions, do these already all require a second? Main motions from the floor and amendments. So is this just redundant and not needed, or does this serve a purpose?
Let me think about this a second. I don't think,
Because if it's not needed, I'll just withdraw it and not waste the committee's time.
is there main motions that don't require a second? Because a point of order is an incidental. It's not a main motion. I don't think there are any main.
Okay, and in that case,
motions.
I withdraw. I do not want to offer this amendment.
Mr. Brown, though, am
Sorry.
I correct that there are no main motions that don't require a second?
I cannot think of any offhand, for that matter, nor can I think of any amendments to the motion
Right.
that don't require a second. But this is off the top of my head, but I agree. But I'll go further. I can't think of any amendments.
I can't either. So I think that's, yeah. So you're withdrawing it, Dr. Moulton?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay, so now we are back to where I thought we were, which is basically debate between the two. If during debate, someone wants to offer an amendment to either of them, it would be in order. But hopefully most amendments have been offered. We are coming up with about 5 minutes left. So we're going to debate between the two, and then we're going to choose which one becomes the primary motion, whether it remains the primary or the substitute becomes the primary. So this is the time to say which one you prefer and why. I don't want to be first to speak. I do wish to speak, but I'd like committee members to have first shot at this. Mr. Latham?
So I do just want to clarify. So with the bottom one as it currently sits, because we kept the word main, it doesn't preempt the default in Roberts for requiring a second for these kind of things like point of order and parliamentary inquiry. So that's my question.
Correct, because they're incidental.
That's my understanding also.
And it also would not require the issue of appeal from ruling of the chair either.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. While I still prefer the primary, my like all lathered up objections are removed because again, this doesn't impact appeals from the ruling of the chair. It also doesn't impact page T44 as talked about by Dr. Latham. So what we have here are the two differences between these. One of them would only require amendments. In one sense, the substitute is narrower. Things that aren't amendments but are subsidiary motions, adhering subsidiary motions, like lay on the table, postpone to a time certain, postpone indefinitely, would not require 20 delegates. So in that sense, it covers less. And contrary to that, the original motion covers more. Any adhering subsidiary motion, including amendments, would require 20. The other difference is the suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action, which I think is really important to require in there. I actually agree with Mr. Robinson in that even if we got rid of everything else, I'd still like a rule that just dealt with that one little thing, because that's been a big problem at our conventions. So I am urging us to keep the primary in favor instead of the substitute. And I would encourage anyone who's a supporter of the substitute to have a minority report, even though I don't particularly care for minority reports, but it's committee member rights. Well, you know, the way it is with bylaws with minority reports, never mind. You can do one, it might not guarantee it get heard because of the way our rules are right now, unless we adopt that other rule I did for a guaranteed minority report first, which goes into effect immediately. Then I had Dr. Moulton and Mr. Latham, but my long-winded way is please keep the primary the primary. Okay, Dr. Moulton.
I prefer the substitute. I think the substitute is a lot simpler. It's a lot more concise. And I think that concision is important. It's more likely to pass and be understood. And the types of motions that we talked about that are dilatory as far as suspending the rules to pass something, well, it might be annoying if they don't require 20 seconds. They are relatively rare compared to everything else, and we've already been dealing with that. So this makes things better than what it is, and I think it's also very likely to pass and more likely to pass than the original motion before the substitute. So I'll be voting in favor of the substitute.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. Mr. Latham?
And this is just a query. I do like both. I think I slightly prefer the primary. So do we, those of us who might be similarly situated to me, have to choose one, or can we vote for both?
You have to choose one to be the majority report of the committee, but that does not preclude you from signing on to a minority report as well. I know people have disagreed with this in the past, but that's been my consistent ruling on the platform committee. And of Mr. Sarwark, as the last time this came up, it was his ruling as convention chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Seebeck?
Yeah, maybe I missed something, but I'm a little puzzled about some of the wording of the primary. Adopt a certain proposition. Okay, suspend and adopt a certain, but makes sense. The or take a particular action, is that applying to suspending the rules?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Mr. Latham?
Sorry. Recall my question way back when I asked
Yes.
whether did we, is it proper to bring that up? Did we get to that?
Yeah, and I think Mr. Seebeck asked it just more succinctly, but maybe yours is a little bit more complex. I think you were asking the phrase as well as motions to suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action. Because that's encapsulated by the commas, the way it's worded, I believe what it means, it's a motion to suspend the rules and do a thing. But a thing can fall into two categories. It's to adopt a proposition or take an action.
Okay, so suspending the rules applies to both.
Yes.
So it would you could, if you want to be super wordy, you could say, as well as all motions to suspend the rules and adopt a certain proposition, or suspend the rules and take a particular action. Is that the same thing
Yes.
essentially? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone further? Mr. Bracco?
So sorry, I'm still trying to mentally catch up here. Of these two, is it correct that the main motion is going to require more things get the 20 seconds?
Yes.
Or is the substitute going to require more?
The main motion will require more.
Are there any particular instances in which the substitute would require 20 delegates where the main motion would not?
No.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are at time. I would like to at least get done with this proposal so that we start clean next meeting. So I am taking it upon myself to move to extend time for 10 minutes. Is there any objection to that motion? Okay, hearing none, we are still on debate between the substitute motion and the primary motion. Is there any further debate? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move to a vote, and I'll explain this because I know it can get confusing, even though by the end you guys are going to be pros. The question before the committee is, shall the substitute motion become the primary motion? So a yes vote would get rid of that first paragraph. And then we would be voting on whether or not to adopt that second paragraph as the recommendation of the committee. A no vote will get rid of that second paragraph and leave that first paragraph to be the one we're voting on as the recommendation of the committee. So if you like the first paragraph, vote no. If you like the first paragraph better, vote no. If you like the second paragraph better, vote yes. Does that make sense? Ms. Arrowwood, when you have a moment to do the roll call vote.
Sure. Arrowwood, I'm going to say yes. Mr. Breckle, would you care to vote on this issue?
Yes, Madam Secretary, I would like to vote no.
You're voting no. Mr. Sazelski,
I vote no.
Rob Latham,
I'm a no as well.
Frank Martin,
No.
Ken Molman, Ken Molman, you're muted. I'll come back to him.
I don't see him.
I'll come back to him. Mr. Logan, Data Logan,
No.
okay.
See if there's any text.
Roberson,
He's no longer in the meeting.
okay, I just want to be sure. Okay, Mike Seebeck,
The vote is to yes to adopt the substitute and no or to move the substitute to the main, and no is not. Is that right?
Correct.
Then I vote no.
okay. Ken Molman,
He seems to have dropped out, and I
okay, I
don't.
just wanted to be sure that maybe he was muted, okay. Okay. One yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Can the alternates vote?
Yeah, I don't think there's an alternate. Is there a stray alternate that has not voted that can vote in place?
I was in S to vote yet, and I know at least Mr. Molman is absent.
Oh,
so-
yeah, no, Dr. Molt should get to vote, Ms. Arrowwood.
Okay, all right. And your vote, sir?
I vote yes.
And is there any other alternates that have not voted?
Rogers hasn't voted.
Okay,
And so he's entitled to vote.
Rogers. Okay. Mr. Rogers?
No.
All right. We have 2 yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 yeses and 7 nos. Do you care to vote, Madam Chair?
No, I do not.
Okay, we have 2 yes, 7 no, 1 abstain, and 1 person was absent.
Okay, so we are now, the primary has remained the primary. I feel fairly certain if Mr. Molman was here, he would have voted yes, but it wouldn't have made a difference in the total. I would have felt really bad if it was like by one vote. So the motion before us now, because the only amendments that would be in order would be to add. And I think we've been through the amendment phase, so the motion before the committee at this point is, shall this motion become the proposal of the committee? And we're going to take a roll call vote on it. And this is your typical roll call. A yes will adopt it as the proposal of the committee. A no rejects it, and we move on to the next proposal, next meeting. Ms. Arrowood, when you are ready.
I'm going to vote yes. Paul Bracco, do you care to vote, sir?
Yes, I would like to vote yes as well.
All right. Mr. Molman? I'm sorry, Moulton. I'm sorry, I got that
And it's
wrong. Dr. Moulton.
You're muted, Dr. Moulton.
I can come back. Nicholas Sazelski.
I vote yes.
All right. Rob Latham.
Yes, and I'll give my extraneous doctor to Dr. Moulton when he comes back.
Okay. Frank Martin.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, is Ken Molman here?
And I.
All right. Data Logan.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Roberson. Okay, I'll put him for absent. Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Okay. Mike Seebeck.
Yes.
Okay. We
Madam
have-
Chair, may I vote on this?
Oh, yes.
We were calling on you, Dr. Moulton.
We were calling
I apologize.
Oh, no problem.
I vote yes. Thank you.
Okay. We'll put you down here. Yes. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 yeses.
And I will not be voting.
Not be voting. Okay, I'll put you down. Okay, we have 9 yeses, 1 abstain and 1 absent.
Okay, so this passes. I wanted to answer a question in chat, and we'll just take a look at what our next meeting time is, and we will adjourn. Mr. Madden was asking the threshold. I'm trying to think of if there's any exceptions to this, but nearly everything in a bylaws committee, the threshold is a majority. These are all proposals of a committee. There isn't any that would require a 2/3 vote, though to adopt at the convention would require a 2/3 vote. Okay, we got through one. I actually do like the very intense discussions. The next meeting we will be taking up the proposal for Mr. Seebeck, which the short title is a little misleading. I could probably title it differently. Lengthen time for platform committee appointments. It's basically I think now platform committee, it's like 4 months before convention, and it's to make it the same amount of time as bylaws, which is 1 year, I believe. We will be getting to that next. I'm sorry?
Yep.
Yeah. I'll be getting to that. We'll be getting to that next time, which will be April 6th. So with that, unless there's any closing comments by the committee, we will adjourn. As usual, I'll leave the room open for guest comments, chit chat, whatever we'd like to do, though I'll stop the recording. So we are adjourned at It's mountain. Oh my God, it's 11 o'clock Eastern. I'm stopping the recording and yeah, it's kind of open floor right now for a little while.